Hello and welcome to the Philippines. Tipping and gifts is a subject we're going to cover today. Tipping in particular seems to be a moving target, changing a bit here. Sometimes tipping actually isn't your choice. More and more on especially the chain restaurants, I'm seeing a service charge of usually 10% added to the bill. Pizza Hut the other day, there's 10% service charge. So look at your bill, look at your receipt, and check and see if you've already paid a tip. It's often listed as a service charge or just the letters SC, which stands for service charge, of course. Otherwise, tipping is entirely up to the individual, but I find that 10% is generally the recommended amount in many places that would usually tip. And later in the video, I'll give you some information on tipping I found in a book, a travel book. Anyway, there are times when your waitress, waiter gives you exceptional service and you want to tip that person individually. Uh, what happens in probably most cases in the Philippines, not all, but most, is that when I'm trying to give the tip to that individual, they say, "Sir, it's put into we all combine our tips and we use it for the group," and that's the way they do it. Even the manager and everybody gets involved. They might use it for a party during the year or at the end of the year for whatever. But that is a practice that is very common in the Philippines, to share the tips with the group. I have been with Filipinos at restaurants a number of times, and I was going to leave a tip, and they have told me, no, no, don't leave a tip. They believe that is a bad Western custom that is coming to the Philippines. And I've been with Filipinos that say, yeah, it's good to leave a tip. I think so. It really is up to the individual. One thing that you will probably notice right away in the Philippines in many restaurants is that customer service is completely different here than what you might be used to, like back in the USA. And I've been involved with I've been asked to help explain that to workers in a restaurant, where when foreigners come in, they often expect to bring them in, seat them, bring them a glass of water, get the menu immediately, and that type of thing. Many times in the Philippines, unless you flag somebody down, they will very possibly bring you a menu. But then it's up to you to kind of wave your hands and flag them down, even get up and go get them when you want to order, whatever you have to do. Also, in many places, when you want your bill, you have to kind of make a rectangular little sign with your fingers after you get the attention of a waiter waitress to get your bill. And if I'm in a little bit of a hurry and I can't get anybody's attention, I just get up and go to the cashier, and then they have to figure it out there. But customer service is completely different here. It's than what you may be used to in Western countries, and I'm not sure what the policies are in Asia and Africa and different parts of Europe. But anyway, that's what it is here. When I tip, and I often do in restaurants, it's usually right around that 10% mark. Sometimes when I buy groceries, I have several bags, and an employee, usually the bagging person, will push the cart out to the taxi stand, wait for me while I wait for a taxi. I usually try to give them 20. About half the time they take it, half the time they refuse it, and sometimes in some stores they even have a sign that says "No tipping, please" on the back of the person. You will find that some places have tip jars where you order. Starbucks started that, I think, so many years ago. And some of the coffee shops here will have that. Some other fast food restaurants will have that. Um, I don't like tipping before I'm served. I remember an interview in a magazine many years ago with a Starbucks employee, and they were asked, does the tipping before you make the coffee affect the quality of what they get. And he said, well, of course it does. And so it's like you're paying extra to get what you've ordered. I've just never liked that idea of having a tip jar ahead of it. And I think Starbucks was the originator of that, I believe. Do you tip at bars? That will probably depend upon what type of place you're in and what part of the Philippines you're in. The bigger cities, it's probably much more common to do that. There are some bars, and I'm not sure what you call them. They have a lot of girl waitresses. Their job is to mingle with the customers, and some will suggest you buy them a drink, which is more expensive. They get a commission off of that. They might get, my understanding, anywhere from some places pay them 20 pesos a drink, some pay 30, maybe 40. I know a guy that pays them 50. So if he pays them 500 pesos a day or $10 a day, if they sell 10 drinks at 50 pesos a drink, if customers buy them a drink and they make 50 pesos for that drink, then they make 1,000 pesos a day, $20. Not a bad wage for Philippines, but most pay a much smaller commission than that. So it's good to understand that up front, and I've been told that by many people, those figures. If you're in a nicer bar or a franchise bar like TGIF Fridays, tipping is probably much the best way to find out what the custom is there and what's expected is to ask other customers, ask them what they do, and because every area is going to be a little bit different. Some places, some bars where you have a band, I know some people who will tip the band, especially if you request a song. Now, I did request a song once. I've tipped the band a few times, and but not always. I requested Beer Barrel Polka for, what was it, Oktoberfest or St. Patrick's Day or something, and no one seemed to know what it was. Now I'll give you some information straight out of a reference book. Lonely Planet is a company that puts out lots of travel guides. And this is what they say, but it really is going to depend upon what part of the Philippines you're in. Restaurants tipping, they say 10% service charge is often added to your bill in cities and tourist hotspots. That's true, but not always. Otherwise, leave 5% to 10%. Taxis, tipping taxis, it says round up taxi fares, but consider tipping more, 50 to 70 pesos, for honest taxi drivers who turn on the meter. Now, my experience is that almost 100% of my taxis have turned on their meter and been honest drivers, and they haven't taken me the long way around, although I've occasionally heard those stories. I think I've had 2 bad experiences, but they weren't bad enough that I was really going to complain about them. And that's where I'm sure the meter reading was not accurate, but it wasn't that far off of what I thought it should be. I'm not going to create a scene. And hotels, tipping in hotels. And like I say, this can change over time, but it says it's not expected, but slide 50 pesos, which is about $1 to porters, or leave a few hundred pesos in the staff tip box at resorts. Now, I've seen that. I've seen tip boxes in a couple of the hotels that I've been in. And there again, it's entirely up to you, but it's always appreciated. They share that as a group generally. And about guides, if you're on a trip and you have a guide with you, always tip your guides. They can really use it. Now, I've had a guide that insisted on taking me down a long trail down to a waterfalls, and I could have easily found it myself, but much of the way down he was telling me how poor he was, and I'm sure he was, and that he only lives off of tips. And I finally got a little annoyed by it because it was just constant. And I told him that I understand you're poor. I'm going to tip you, so please don't tell me about how poor you are anymore. Not exactly those words, but I was diplomatic and kind about it. But there's a point where it just becomes very annoying. But yeah, they do need the money, and you should tip them. Now I'll tell you about a couple other experiences that you will probably experience in the Philippines. You're riding in your cab, your taxi, away from the airport or wherever you are, and there are certain intersections where there's a stoplight, and you will have kids begging for food, coming up and looking in the window, begging for money. You will have a lady carrying a very small child, begging for money, and they say not to give things out. I've had a couple taxi drivers who they have a little bag of candy there, and they'll give them something like that. But generally, in fact, it's against the law to give out money to people begging, but would be best to give food if you're going to give anything. You will also find citizen traffic enforcers, let me call that. Let's say you're in a vehicle. They will try to direct you into a parking spot. I've seen this downtown and different streets in Cebu, or busy streets, and they just kind of hang out in front of a store like a 7-Eleven or another convenience store. And if you've got your blinker on to turn in, they'll direct you into the parking spot, even though you didn't need that direction, and hopefully they expect to get a couple pesos for that. When you back out of that spot, they will stand out and they will stop traffic for you so that you can back out, and they expect a few pesos for that. And I think some Filipinos, because it's mostly Filipino drivers here, I've seen them uh, hand them a few pesos, maybe 5 or 10 pesos. One thing I would recommend if you're staying at a place you're going to be for some time and there are people there, service personnel, whatever, that you want to tip, it's easier to start lower and work your way on up, increase it over time. If you start high initially and then you start deciding, gee, I'm paying too much, does it become insulting to a person when you cut back to that amount? They're wondering what they're doing wrong. So my advice is to start lower and work your way on up. Now let's talk about gift giving in the Philippines. It is part of the culture here, and it is if you come into town, you're going to meet somebody, you should probably bring a gift with you. And I noticed that in China too. I found out right before I got there, so I was able to pick something up in a store. Um, People often expect gifts. In fact, when I showed up in China 10 years ago, the people that I was meeting brought me a gift, which really surprised me. So I would have really been embarrassed if I didn't have something to give them back. It's very common for Filipinos and foreigners to, when you take a trip, when you're coming into the country, if you're meeting somebody. If I visit another island and I come back, a couple of the people that I know um, are expecting to get something from me. So I buy them a T-shirt, 100, 200 pesos a T-shirt. Candy is real popular here. I had one girl in my first 6 months here when I came back from the U.S. Her first statement was, "Where's my candy? Where's my chocolate?" It's ingrained in the culture here. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it is a token. It's something. It's part of the culture. So if you want to stay in good graces with the people, you should bring some sort of gift. And they love American chocolate too, Western chocolate, Belgium chocolate. So you don't want that stuff melting in your luggage though. And one last note about gifts and that sort of thing is that my understanding is that the custom here in the Philippines is that the person whose birthday it is pays for the birthday. Uh, you put on the feed, you put on the party to whatever extent you're going to do. That's why the girls that I know and their friends were so interested in what I was going to do for my birthday. And I don't usually do a lot for my birthday, but because they were so interested in what I was going to do and the fact that they felt that they should come along and do it with me, they all got to go to a nice resort on Mactan Island. Anyway, keep that in mind. Your birthday, you pay for the birthday, and if you're the rich foreigner, they expect you, they want you, they're looking forward to that big party that you're going to throw. Where are you going to take them? Anyway, thank you for coming along. That's a little bit on tipping. I'm interested in your comments, your experiences. And as you get out in the country towns, I'm sure there's a lot less tipping expected and done out there. But I'm sure us rich Westerners can bring that custom into more and more parts of the Philippines. So thank you for watching. Please like, please share the video, please subscribe. Safe travels to you all wherever you're at, and we'll see you next time.